everyone. Welcome to Project Herpetoculture podcast. I'm your host, Roy Arthur Blodgett, and I'm joined as always by my intrepid co-host, Philip Leitz of Arids Only. We have an excellent show for you today, but before diving in, we have some brief housekeeping. So first, I'd like to thank Dylan and the Animals at Home Network for hosting our show. It continues to be a pleasure to be part of this platform. We'd also like to extend special gratitude to Charlie, who generously edits our audio and has done a lot to improve the quality of our show over time. And we'd also like to take a moment to tell you about our sponsors. So first, we have Custom Reptile Habitats, who have been with us since day one. They produce top-of-the-line PVC reptile enclosures, and I use them for a lot of the large format vivaria here. They're also carrying universal rocks, misking products, and a bunch of other useful stuff. So if you're in the market for any of that and you're planning to make a purchase, consider doing so through the link in our bio or description. We'll receive a small commission at no additional cost to you, and that really helps us keep the lights on over here.
Up next, we have Fairy Tale Dragons. That's the joint venture between Heather Moy and Ron St. Pierre, both of whom have achieved legendary status in herpetoculture. They've accomplished quite a lot and produced some of the finest bearded dragons and taliqua in the country, alongside a whole host of other species such as emerald tree boas and green tree pythons. Check them out if you're in the market for any of that, and be sure to follow along with them on social media. They're always up to something interesting over there.
Next, we have Cold-Blooded Caffeine, roasters of delicious coffees from all over the globe. We have a private label with them, the PH Blend, which is a light roast coffee from Rwanda. It's a great choice for those who prefer a more floral coffee with notes of berry, but they have a wide variety of options for a broad array of preferences. So check them out. And if you place an order, don't forget to use the code PROJECTHERP for 10% off.
We're also very pleased to have the support of Exoterra, a brand that needs no introduction. It's safe to say that herpetoculture wouldn't be where it is today without the influence of Exoterra. For decades, they've been industry leaders in innovation, offering just about everything needed for reptile care, from diets and supplements to enclosures, substrates, and lighting. We're both big fans of their naturalistic terraria and substrates in particular. They have a lot of interesting products in the works as we speak, and we're really looking forward to seeing what comes next.
And next we have Tamura Designs. For those in the know, Tamura Designs is widely regarded as one of the finest enclosure manufacturers on the planet. They produce outstanding large format vivaria with endless options for customization, drains, UV printed backgrounds, lighting rigs. On top of all of that, they also make amazing deli cup displays for expos and these incredible multi-unit condos, which I use here. So if you're interested in any of that and you decide to make a purchase, use the code Herpetoculture for 15% off one item as a special offer to our listeners only. We also have Happy Dragons. We're really thankful to have the support of Happy Dragons. They are producing some amazing content for bettering our reptile care. And we've been actually partnering with them to produce even more content like webinars. Also, the platform and subscription service offers breeder access to first clutches, things like that. We have online courses coming down the pipeline. In addition, we have live Q&As with reptile experts, such as Mariah Healy from Reptiphiles. It's truly an outstanding subscription package that also offers discounts on their supply partners, such as Ovipost and Joss's Frogs. It's really an outstanding product. So check it out. And let us know what you think.
And last but not least, if you're interested in supporting the show directly with something of a tip or a monthly donation, check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/projectherpetoculture. We have a monthly live chat there with all of our paid subscribers. That's been a whole lot of fun so far. We also have a whole line of merchandise like t-shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and more on our website. And of course, sharing the show with a friend, subscribing on YouTube, and keeping up with social media is always very helpful.
And with all that said, we're on to the show. Thanks, everybody.
7. I don't know.
All right. This is Project Herpetoculture Podcast, episode 86, I believe. Phil thinks it's 87. I think it's 86. It's one of those two.
Probably right.
We have an excellent guest today who I'm stoked to talk to. Somebody who actually doesn't live like on the complete other end of the country from me, which just seems like a rarity in the herp world. Who I actually got to shake his hand in person recently. This is Lucas Lee. Lucas, welcome to Project Herpetoculture.
That's right. Yeah, highlight of my year, shaking your hand so far on that beautiful day. No, yeah, thank you for having me. Happy to be here. I'm a big fan of the show and of both of yours, so should be a good time.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for making the time, and also a big fan of you. So we got plenty to talk about.
Let's keep it rolling.
Let's do it. Let's just let it rip. So I guess to begin, as usual, we always like to kind of start with the softball and just hear a little bit about your background. For those who aren't familiar with you and your story, how did you get the bug? How did you get wrapped up into this horrific world of herpetoculture?
It's such a bug, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I, like everyone, of course, have always been a critter kid since I was old enough to be. I think my first pet snake was probably a corn snake when I was 4 or 5. But it was a short little trip with reptiles at that age. And then I used to joke with my friends that I kept just about everything as a pet except a dog, from like then till college. I had newts, I had frogs, I had dwarf hamsters, toads, turtles, pretty much whatever I could get my hands on, except there were no more snakes. And then I was going to college at UC Santa Cruz, and I decided I was about to say for some reason, but I just remembered the reason. I was walking to class. It's a beautiful campus right in the middle of the forest, and I came across this just stunning 4-foot Pacific gopher snake crossing the path. And there was just something about that moment that completely captured me and reminded me how cool snakes are. And I went to a pet shop and got a snake that week. And from there, I have been keeping reptiles in far greater numbers. It just keeps growing. So that's kind of, just kind of started in college, and after graduation, moved back home, got a job at the East Bay Vivarium in Berkeley, where I got to cut my teeth with a bunch of different snakes and lizards and amphibians and inverts that I never would have brought home, but you get to kind of get familiar with the animals, taking care of them at the shop without the commitment of owning them, which was really great. And really broadens your horizons. And after that, I started working as a field biologist here in the Bay Area for private sector environmental consulting company, which I still work for that company today, doing a little bit more desk work than field work these days, but I still get out when I can. And I completed my master's degree with Dr. Loafman for the evidence-based herpetoculture lab at West Liberty University. I wrapped that up last spring, so almost a year ago. Time flies. And,
hey, congrats on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's about it.
It's a pretty good rap sheet, honestly. I mean,
thank you. I do podcasts, so I've had to I've had to pull that one out a few times.
Yeah. Can I ask a little bit? I really loved your description about working for East Bay Vivarium and the way that working in a shop acts as sort of like an exposure mechanism where you're kind of getting exposed to a really wide diversity of different types of animals and reptiles and amphibians and stuff. I worked at a local reptile shop here in Colorado called Reptilian Haven, which was like this ancient, extremely old school reptile shop with a lot of crazy chaos and wild employees and crazy stories.
God, it sounds like
sounds like EBV.
2 peas in a pod.
Right. Well, that's kind of what I wanted to touch on is like, can you talk a little bit about East Bay Vivarium and sort of what it was like and what it was about and the whole scene? Because I think it's like one of the names that you hear, and if you're sufficiently new or sufficiently just coincidentally naive about it, about that place, it might just be kind of cool to know. I'm one of those guys. I am that guy who is a little naive and somewhat unfamiliar. I've heard the name a million times, but I just don't know all the details. So
totally right, yeah, and it's an old one. I'm sure that it'll just kind of be doing my best in terms of the history, because I'm not really sure either. But they claim to be the oldest and largest like formal reptile shop in the country. I believe it has been in the East Bay the whole time. It might have started in Oakland, and now it's been in Berkeley for many decades. Yeah, it's a really, really special place. I would say a bit of an institution here in the area for anybody that's into exotic animals or inverts, reptiles and amphibians specifically. No birds, but I think they used to have birds, because the guy that breeds the rats used to tell me that they had a bunch of birds. So yeah.
Cool.
I think it started out of a dude's garage and then became a more formal facility. And yeah, just a really long running store with some great folks that work there. I would say my favorite person there, his name's John. He's partial owner. The vivarium has kind of been a two-headed monster for a long time, with partners rather than a single owner, and it's kind of changed hands over the years. But John, worked there as a teenager and eventually bought in and has been there the whole time. And he's definitely one of my mentors in the hobby, and
wow,
a very bright mind.
Whoa,
brilliant
super cool.
Guy. Yeah.
Very, very cool. And so I'd also just be curious to know a little bit more about your experience of working there. I mean, because I feel like as happy as I have been to have learned so much about what I learned regarding reptiles and amphibians at Reptilian Haven, boy, it can be a rough place to work, man. Working in a reptile shop can be freaking rough, right?
Yes. Also agreed.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just sort of curious about your thoughts about that.
I would say, first and foremost, like I was saying at the top, really incredible opportunity to become acquainted with a super diverse array of species, most of which I didn't know existed until I saw them at the shop, especially as somebody that was a little more green. Customer service can be rough. I think we all are pretty aware that people come into this with sometimes a large knowledge gap.
Yeah.
And it can be tricky to walk somebody through the intricacies of keeping the species that they thought looked cool and trying to keep that within an hour and make sure that they get everything they need if they decide to bring that home.
Right.
So there's definitely feel good interactions, feel good transactions, and not so much. You try to do the best you can, but working in retail, I think, is inherently a little bit soul crushing, especially when living things are involved. Right. So you of course you see the entire spectrum of fantastic keepers and people that never should have had a reptile in the first place and are coming to you for help. So it can be pretty bad, like you said, but you just try to be as much of a positive force as you can, and you can't fix everybody, I suppose.
Yeah.
I hope that's a good answer.
I feel like it would be, I think it's a good answer.
Okay.
It seems like, like all the challenges that I would anticipate working at a shop like that, and
yeah,
it's so funny, like to think of working at EBV. Like there was a time in my life where it would have been like a dream to work at EBV, when I was like teenager myself or something like that. I've been going there since I was like 4 or 5 years old, probably, taking trips down into the bay to check out all the cool reptiles. And load up on cork and all the stuff that you can't get elsewhere around here.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. The corner of sticks, rocks, and cork is like, that's the real mecca.
Yeah, totally. Just piles of cork.
I would say, any shop like that, I feel like not just EBV, but any big exotic retail shop is really going to be as good as its crew.
Totally.
And of course, in many cases, stuff like that is going to be a rotating cast of characters. So I feel really lucky. There were some really fantastic people there during my time who were animal first, people that were there for the right reasons. And I, carry a lot of those connections to this day. But yeah, it's a big operation. I'm not sure we could get into the ethics and morality of large exotic shops if you'd like. I'm not sure that it's necessarily always the best thing, but it is what it is.
It's a complicated model for sure, to say the least. And I don't know if now's the time necessarily to dive into it, but
right.
But yeah, it's definitely interesting to hear about it. And just like, again, just from this feeling of like it being an institution and like what you said about just like, it's as good as the crew that's there. That feels so true for me, just as like a visitor there over the years, going at different times and seeing it like go through these peaks and valleys, and it's just
it's like anything,
it's really,
I mean,
it's like anything. Yeah.
I think an inherent pitfall is that cool animals attract a very, very wide range of people. We're naturally drawn to these things, everybody for different reasons, but it's not necessarily a glamorous job, right? You're mostly cleaning poop and trying to stop kids from banging on glass. So yeah, totally. It's not always exact, it's not necessarily what people think it's going to be all the time. And
totally.
Yeah, that can create a little bit of trouble in terms of the crew part.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, shifting away from EBV, and I'm glad we touched on that, because again, like I said, it's just like such a mythical place in some ways within herpetoculture, especially for us kind of Bay Area people. But yeah, moving away from that, I'm curious about just kind of when did it all kind of turn for you from being like, oh, keeping snakes to like Centralian exotics, like that whole, how did that progress, and was it quick, and how did it go?
It's a great question. I'm going to kind of be reflecting on this as I talk. I don't know that I have an answer off the rip, but I would say for a good while I was keeping the comfortable pet quantity of animals, somewhere between like 2 and 5. Does that sound about right? That sounds about right. Not like And then I would say in 2020, the COVID thing happened. So, a lot more time on my hands. I was at home a lot. And B, I got out of the vivarium and out of the other job I was doing, which was working as a fishmonger, and got the real job with the environmental consulting company. So the paychecks were a little bit better. And then I also got in touch with a guy named Nick Mutton. And if you have not heard of Nick, absolute troublemaker, very dangerous. But no, one of the most successful python breeders in the country, definitely known for his work with carpet pythons and other Australian stuff. And early in 2020, Nick kind of took me under his wing and just sent me a bunch of animals. And it was a breeding loan situation. I had purchased a Brettles python from him previously, and then he sent me 4 adult pairs. So
wow,
that's when it really changed into something where I was devoting a lot of time, energy, and resources into building up a collection more than just having my few pets. And, I got really deep into the weeds with the podcast, and I really spent most of the COVID time just learning as much as I could about animals and growing my collection and capacity for keeping as well. It felt like I was bringing home a new cage like once every other week and trying to make something for the next thing. Definitely it's where my stimulus checks went, that's for sure, which was not the smartest thing, but hey, what are you going to do? That's kind of where it changed. And a lot of credit to Nick for kind of showing me the ropes, and it has rolled up or downhill depending on your point of view from there.
Hey, I'm back.
Sorry, I'm giving Phil a ridiculous screen name.
Good.
Anyway,
That is so stupid.
Phil's back.
That was excellent. Thank you for that. God damn.
Sorry, I had to. That sounds like that sounds like it all tracks, like COVID. What am I going to do with myself? Oh, I've got stimmy checks.
Oh yeah. I mean, no, the first one, that like 1,200, come on. We all remember that 1,200. That's an ARS rack.
Yeah.
But it's certainly it's hard to simplify it. It's kind of just a monster that emerges from within us, I feel like. And,
totally.
I was able to, I should say, so I really, my main focus, my main love, Australian stuff. And that kicked off before COVID. Jumping back a little bit, going out of order. My first, I am absolutely enamored with this species moment was with a Woma python in maybe 2017, 2018. After I got that corn snake in college, I went to EBV as a customer and I saw a Woma and I was like, that is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And it looks ridiculous. And I asked to hold it. And this satanic employee was like, oh, absolutely. And just tossed this 5-foot python at me. It's nuzzling its face on my arm and then jump, and then I'm just dripping blood all over the aisles. So they chose me in a way, just marked me right off the rip. So Australian stuff from that point forward, when I was working at EBV, I was able to get my hands on my first black-headed python, which had been for sale for like 2 years. Nobody took it home. So I ended up talking a nice discount with the boss because it had been there so long and brought that home. So that's how I got on this path to keeping the things that I do, combined with Nick sending me Bruttles pythons. Just the gates to Australian insanity were unlocked early.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it sounds like you just kind of I don't know, just kind of dove in. I mean, and it's really cool that you had that kind of mentorship, both from EBV and that experience, but also, I mean, to have that kind of relationship with someone like Nick right off the bat feels like pretty freaking unique, in terms of how most people would enter herpetoculture on a more serious level. It's really pretty cool.
Yeah. No, I'm very grateful for it. I'm still not sure why Nick decided that he wanted to talk to me and send me his snakes, but I'm glad he did.
Yeah. Worked out. I'm sure he doesn't regret it.
No, and we are doing the same thing to this day. There's a beautiful hypo Bruttles that's laying her clutch as we speak, and he gets half of those babies. So
that's awesome. Yeah, that's super cool. I loved it. I also just love to hear those kinds of collaborations happening, and that's also true with Centralian, right? It's are you one half of Centralian? Is it a partnership or?
So Centralian,
how does that all work?
This is a good question. My good friend Alex, who I met working at the vivarium, he and I are 50-50 partners on some specific animal projects
Mm-hmm.
under the Centralian umbrella, but not everything.
Yeah.
There's some things that are just for Papa, you know?
Yeah.
And vice versa. He's got stuff that I don't get to put my hands on either. But no, he's my my official, unofficial partner.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. How has that been, collaborating in that way with somebody and kind of having another person in the mix? Or do you like share space?
He's my next door neighbor.
Oh, cool.
So it wasn't that way until recently, but all right. So met Alex at the vivarium. He ended up becoming the manager there for a few years.
Cool.
And, even after I was gone. So when I would go back to the shop to get feeders or supplies or whatnot, he was always my go-to there. And we became, really close friends and started doing the animal thing together. I think it started with getting dwarf monitors together. We went in on a trio of Kimberly rocks because, neither of us could do that financially on our own. And eventually he had to move spots and the apartment next to mine opened up. So we got him over here and, we're kind of one hole drilled through the wall away from having a facility.
So
It's a triplex. Yeah. It's an apartment building in Oakland.
So how often do you guys argue over who gets to feed the Kimberleys?
Oh, dude. Well, so what we did is I'm pretty generous. I let him have 2 at his house and then I had one at my house.
Okay.
And so it's usually split custody. But unfortunately, we ended up with 3 boys, and we ended up placing those with people that had girls, so that they had a purpose in life other than being pretty. But they were fun while we raised them up. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. I just feel like I would, if Roy and I ever went in on a project together, I would fight with him for.
Well, so right now the things usually we have more than one thing, so we can split them up and each enjoy. But at the moment, we have a 50-50 project going on pink Argentine boas. And we only have the females so far. And again, I'm a generous guy. It's over at his house, but I miss her. She's very, very sweet.
That's super funny. That's great. Partnerships like that.
You get to play that card, right? Because he hatched out golden tail geckos. He produced Stropharis tenicata. And, nice. Remember that Argentine, maybe one of those strokes needs to come over here. And it's all fun, though. He's probably the only person that I could do this with and not have issues. So it's great.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
That's really awesome.
Really, really cool. I feel like that'd be kind of hard to do, and like sometimes I think about various partnership concepts and stuff like this, and it just it totally freaks me out. It's like I would get so jealous of them, getting to take care of this, something, and me not having total control over it. I'd be such a jerk ass. I'd be the worst.
There definitely has to be a bedrock of friendship, love, respect. Luckily, he and I are on the same page as it pertains to most, husbandry, welfare, type stuff. But we go back and forth. He schools me, I school him, and it's always just trying to make each other better.
That's awesome. Super cool. I'm all about friendly competition. That's great. And friendly. Really? Yeah, it's wonderful. Very cool.
Yeah. I need to listen to him more, though, to be fair.
What?
It's like I'm the one that like, hey, I got Ackies again. He's like, oh, God damn it. But he's more restrained.
Okay. So he's more of a stick-to-itive, stick on a project, I stick with it kind of guy, and you're more of like, hey, that's that new project possibility over there to the left. Very technical. Is that what it is?
That is fair to say.
Okay.
I have a core that I will never deviate from, but then I have like these cages that are for like whatever else.
Yeah. Right. Whatever the next thing might be, the weirdest, the thing you just found on Fauna Classifieds that you didn't know was there before. And you're like, I definitely have to get that.
That's the thing. And it kind of goes off of what we were talking about with working at a reptile shop, is that I am firmly of the belief that you cannot know whether a species is for you until you keep it. Sure. And I would kind of say that can go either really badly, or you can be aware of that and do some version of like a responsible test run, like don't just like dump the animal if you decide that it's not for you, but it's also a disservice if you're not into that animal and you keep it because you feel guilty, and then it ends up getting the short end of the stick in terms of care or whatnot, So whenever that's the case, whenever I try something out and it doesn't stick, I just am really, intentional on where it goes after me.
Gotcha.
I think that's the best way to be.
So genuinely curious. Can you give me an example of an animal?
Of a no-no?
Yeah, one that you got that was like, you know what? This one's not for me.
I can probably give you a few off the top because it was recent.
Uromastyx ornata, just
you go right to hell, Roy. How dare you?
I'm not super Uromastyx literate. Is that the Egyptian one?
No, the
ornate,
or the gigantic ones, and the Uromastyx ornata are the like crazy, colorful turquoise, green, yellow.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Phil's true heart lizard is the Uromastyx ornata, so I had to just throw a dagger.
Fantastic.
It's true.
Yeah. No. Let's see. Rhino rat snakes didn't do it for me.
Okay.
I also just was supposed to have 2.2 and it turned out to be 4.0. So another signal from the universe that it wasn't.
That'll make you throw up.
Oh my God, it was ridiculous. Yeah. And it like never mind. It's fine.
No, but for real, man. I mean, it's like when you put money into something and then you've been keeping it for a while and you're like, nothing's happening. Right. You get a more accurate sexing and you're like, God damn it. Right. Like, it's
well, and luckily in this case too, like I didn't put money into it. I love to trade with friends. And so I got Dr. Loafman's adult pair. It wasn't a pair. I don't know how they weren't fighting in West Virginia, but as soon as they got here, I put them together and they're trying to kill each other.
Sounds like the doctor swindled you, dude. No, just kidding.
Yeah, he probably did.
Damn it.
I made him read too many papers.
He's like, time for payback.
He could do worse if he really wanted to. But yeah, so rhino rats were one. I know it's kind of cliche, but ball pythons were one.
Oh yeah.
With no shade intended. You got to be honest with yourself. Not everything speaks to your reptile keeping soul.
Right.
Yeah,
that's true. And you have to. I feel like I was just talking about this with Brendan. He's my employee at the shop. He's been on the show. Great dude. Shout out Brendan.
Shout out Brendan.
Yeah, let's go, Brendan.
Cheers.
But we were talking about the ways that one of the ways you try to keep yourself growing and you try to continue to I use this phrase all the time where I say like, oh, I'm like buffing out my resume, and it's a kind of a dumb way to put it because it's not like I'm applying for a job in the future or something like that. It's not really what it is. It's just more about like, I like to keep
for you.
Yeah. I really like to keep the wheels turning, it feels like, actually another way of thinking about it too, is I had an art professor in college who used to say, I feel like you probably haven't really decided if you like a food unless you try to put it in everything you eat for a while, and he would always tell this story about how he grew up like hating cilantro and it made him want to throw up. And then he started
one of those.
Yeah. One of those epic mutants. And he like kept, just dabbling it into his food. And then eventually he's like found himself really craving cilantro and wanting it as a part of his diet. Right. And it's like, I feel like in some ways that's kind of what you're doing when you take on new projects and you take on new challenges. You're trying to see if it fits your tastes.
And at the same time, you're usually going to learn a lot when you take on one of those projects where you're like, I honestly don't know. I might, you're going to give it the good, honest try. You're going to give the animals the best chances at success.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work out, you're going to send them to where they're going to be valued,
exactly,
well cared for, and useful. So it's not like it's not something that ought to be taken lightly.
Exactly.
But it is something that, I think is really, really good to do. It's a really good way of keeping yourself fresh and keeping yourself.
I couldn't agree with you more. And yeah, all the steps you outlined, exactly. Like it will, if you do not intentionally address each of those points, it can be really shitty. You can be a piece of shit. Yep. But if you are intentionally not a piece of shit, and the animal welfare and how they're kept and where they go next is part of your calculus, then I don't see any problem personally in taste testing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And even being able to take on something and say, all right, well, at least I learned a little bit about this in a way that's going to allow me to put some of that information out there. It's going to be helpful for other people who maybe will eventually take it further than where I've taken it, and it gives you a good way of showing off what, perhaps something that might not have otherwise been given a lot of attention by somebody. You've given it all of your attention and a legitimate, real, hard, honest try. And so then you've at least shown some of the more positive points of keeping that species and how cool they can be. And it's like, look, man, I mean, maybe this didn't work out here, but there's a real chance that this, that if you took this on as someone who is like, I've been interested in these guys for a long time, but never pulled the trigger because of reason X, Y, or Z. Well, now's your chance. And this is a great opportunity, just because it can build, I feel like so many animals in herpetoculture, where people sort of built the market for them in some regard. They somebody gave them the time of day. It's just give the time of day.
Question.
And I think you give anything the time of day. I'm always psyched when I see somebody working with something weird and dumb. If I saw someone taking on like a crazy gigantic ribbon snake project, I'd be like, dang, that's pretty cool.
Wait till we start talking Lake Chapala garter snakes, man.
Yeah. I'm in the Mississippi slimy salamander camp myself. That's the market I want to grow, but
love it.
Anyway, sorry.
And I was just going to say too, it's not exclusively whether you like it or not. You also just don't want to be trying to fit the square peg in the round hole. For example, my space is a second story, south facing, no air conditioning. I cook. If I liked the rhino rat snakes, I'm not going to be able to keep them under 85 degrees. And, so there's going to be things that just don't fit your mold as well. And sometimes you don't really figure that out until they're in your care. So just another thought on that.
It's definitely true. Yeah. Yep. Right, Roy?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's just the way it is. I think that's one of the people always kind of trash the whole Noah's Ark thing, as an immature phase of herpetoculture. It's
a fancy word about a treadmill that Dylan uses.
The hedonic treadmill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which is I mean, I think that's I wish that everyone starting out in herpetoculture knew that term and knew what it meant.
It's real.
They could be prepared on some level, at least to have that in their mind before they're like, oh, whoa, I'm in way over my head. But I think the functional aspect of the whole Noah's Ark phase, if you want to call it a phase, is that you do get a chance to kind of figure out what your tastes are and what your strengths are. Because also, I think that
what you're going to lock into long term.
Yeah, exactly. And also just what you're good at, because I think that some people are they just have a way with certain things that they don't with other things. It's
this is where it's art. This is where it's art.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. This is exactly where it's art, because when I was working in commercial illustration, people would say, "Oh, it's
very cool." By the way.
Oh, hey,
dope.
It was really cool. I was doing concept art for games and film, and
I can't draw for shit, and I admire it.
Oh well, listen. Let me tell you, it's not as glamorous as it sounds. If character makes is mostly picking up shit, drawing and is mostly doing terrible drawings. It's most most of what you're doing is you're just putting out absolute garbage most of the time, struggling with what to, anyway, I'm getting on a tangent here.
It's all good.
But you met people who were extremely good figure artists. They were very good with figures. They're very good with the model. They're very good at anatomical development in a, on a 2D space. You had your folks who were horrible at like organic shapes, and they were really good at doing cityscapes and machinery and vehicles and weaponry for video games, right? And then you had the really weird, rare freaks of nature who could do both. And you were like, I don't know why you can do both, but it makes me really uncomfortable, Like
right. His name's Owen McIntyre. He can breed pythons, boas, and colubrids. Like,
yes,
what the hell?
I don't know how you can do everything, It's amazing. And so I think that it's probably some level, some of it's related to like your persona. Some of it's related to like probably some weird inherent shit in us where it's like,
I agree.
You just relate to a little bit more. You know what I mean?
And you guys had Eric on the show, right? Eric Burke.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We did.
So, another one of my snake dads, another one of my mentors. He always is talking about, he wants to zero in on what that is. What makes somebody a boa person versus a python person versus a colubrid person. There's definitely something in the DNA, like just that predisposes us to what we like.
Totally. Yeah.
What is that? Who knows?
Yeah. And which is so cool. I think that's one, because I feel like it's reflected in the way people do. I mean, personally, it's like, I couldn't tell you where to even begin with a pair of Polychrus peruvianus, right? Which I wouldn't even know. I know what they are. I know they're badass. But in terms of like how you should set it up and what the temperature ranges should be and how, like where my comfort level would be, be feeling like I could really trust my assessment of things going right or wrong. Feeling like I could really trust the methodology behind what I was doing, like the confidence. It feels like being a complete baby beginner all over again. But like, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, and all of these things are exactly why I found the most difficult question of all time to be, what is a good first snake?
Yeah, it's impossible.
Lizard. It's
can't answer the question.
Because if you're doing it right, it's the same amount of work, more or less, for anything. If you're doing it right.
Yeah.
If it's less work, you're not doing it right.
Right.
And you should get what you like and expect it to live decades in most cases. Yeah.
Right.
So anyway.
No, totally. Yeah, no, and it's been interesting, like I have these so I'm mostly obviously a desert lizard guy. It's just like medium bodied herbivorous desert lizards, and omnivorous desert lizards really hit the number for me. For some reason, that's what I do well with. And so, but now I have these two species of tortoises, right? So I have these Conyxus specci, the hingeback tortoise, and I have the little Tunisian Greeks, the little Testudo graeconabulensis thingies. They're really cool. But let me tell you, tortoises, to me, when I look at a tortoise, I'm like, you might as well be a fish. I don't know what you are. I don't understand you. And it's not that I don't, obviously I get them a little. I've kept them before. I've been around people who keep tortoises. Like I'm not ignorant of them, but in terms of like, it took a really long time to retune my instincts to what to look for in the Conyxus specci to really feel comfortable knowing that like, oh no, I'm confident that I'm doing the right things with you. I feel very, very confident now based on all of the behavior, but it was a lot of trial and error. And it was a lot of like, going to be the 100%. Right thing. I honestly have no idea. And I'm not really sure what to look for to know if it's the right damn thing or not. Like, I don't know that it took me a long time to learn their body language. And I still ask Jeremy Thompson stupid questions where he's like, oh yeah, that's this, dummy. He doesn't say that, but he could, and it would be totally legitimate, and it's kind of cool. Like it feels, I was actually just talking with another friend about this today. It feels so good to get to the place with something really foreign where like now I feel really confident that I'm doing a really good job with the Conyxus specci, and I'm feeling really confident with the little Greeks. Like it's really nice. And so outside my comfort zone. So it's like,
I couldn't agree more. And I think that there's people like you and I that like a little variety, or maybe even need it, right? You know, I'm looking to my right at a Gurnia. There's geckos back there. There's pythons. There's colubri. Like, I can't just do one thing. And then there's other people like, I don't have a good name off the top of my head, but maybe all they have is green tree pythons or something.
Oh,
like
yeah,
that,
sure.
You know, and like more respect to them, but I can't monoculture this thing. That it ain't gonna work.
Yeah, the folks who have the discipline to stick to the one thing they're very, very good at, right?
Right.
That's pretty strange too. We had again another art reference. Like, there were definitely people like that who were good at one goddamn thing, and it's like, you know, at some point, someone would just tell him, bro, I love that you're trying other stuff, but just stick to caricatures for Christ's sake. Like, it's the only thing you can do. It's the only thing you're good at. Just stick to portraits. It's what you're really good at. Let it go. You know, whatever. Yeah. Maybe children's book illustration is that's where you should stay, because that's about as high as your technical faculty in drawing goes, even if they're very good draftsmen, right? So it's like, it's interesting. It's super weird to see the way people can just just really zero in or spread out, people who have a lot of flexibility cognitively. And I think it makes a lot of sense, because, you know, if you think about it just from the perspective of having to try to interpret reptilian psychology and body language, when you move to something totally new, you're basically starting from zero. You know what I mean? You're like, frankly, like, I'm not really 100% sure, on the body language of certain things. And it's like, you might know a little more, a little less, and there's some basic stuff that you can always go by. But boy, it can be really tricky, especially when you spend enough time working with a single group of animals to where you're so confident about their body language and so intuitive about the way they respond and knowing when you're doing the right and the wrong thing. It can feel so disarming or handicapping in a way, to feel like you don't have that to rely on anymore. It's a really, hey, cat, Jesus. Hang on, let me let my cat out.
Cat Jesus.
Hey, yeah, here. This is
Cat Jesus.
Zeus.
He's got Cat Jesus. Wow, that is a beautiful cat.
He's a pretty kitty. He's a good boy.
Zeus.
Man.
He's a pest.
We got one more here. Here we go. P2.
Also a beautiful cat. Nice cats.
Thank you.
I love cats.
He has good tasting cats for sure.
Yeah, it's true. They're pretty sweet.
Nice.
Sorry about that.
All good. I think I've sufficiently got us all over the place. So
this is great. This is what it's all about.
Yeah, this is honestly.
I'm really good at not having focused conversations.
That's the whole, frankly, that's the whole point of the show. You know, like,
this is why we just have to hang out face to face sometime, you know?
Absolutely.
Where we can really just ramble.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Which Gurnia do you have, by the way? What do you?
I have the just Stokeseye, Gidgies.
Stokeseye? Okay.
I would love to get more. It's another recent example of trying a different flavor.
You
know, I never thought that I'd have small Australian skinks, but they're the coolest freaking things, and I never want to not have them. Yeah. They're one of the ones that sticks, you know.
Yeah, dude. I have Hosmeri and Cunninghami and Striolata, and
fantastic.
The Hosmeri I call most of the time I call them Hogmeri, but they're I feel like they're just fat pine cones. That's all they are. Just these fat. They're awesome. They're so cool. Such goofy little lizards.
No, I'm really enamored with them, and part of the fun of keeping them too is that they do fit into the broader ecosystem of other animals that I keep, in terms of the Australian pythons and the dwarf monitor. So it's fun to keep different pieces of one puzzle, and you can kind of put all those observations together and make a beautiful tapestry.
Yeah, it's true. It's funny. I actually never thought about it that way, because I feel like when Roy tells me, he's like, I'm really into animals from the Guyana Shield. I'm like, cool. Like a region sounds so uninteresting to me, but I don't mean, and that sounded super rude. I don't mean like
shots fired, man.
I don't mean like the guy.
Roy, he hates you. No,
I don't.
Guy's a hater.
I just meant it was a difference in like the way I meant it as like a difference in the way I a topic.
I get it.
It's not that the Guyana shield isn't inherently interesting and the animals you work with are really fucking awesome. I meant that like I've never thought about what interests me as a region. It's always been like real individual stuff. But at the same time, I'm also kind of lying about that too, because I didn't realize, you know, I keep forgetting that the Xenogama they share habitat with the Mesayuros, and so do my I have the Schneider skinks, the Umacy Schneider.
I love Schneider skinks,
dude.
Underrated.
Yeah. So cool.
They're so cool, dude. And
my first pet lizard.
Dude,
there you go.
That's an EBV lizard for me. You know, the people that came in that want a leopard gecko or you know, something like that. I'm like, well, have you seen this orange skink that is way cooler? Like,
dude,
mine probably came from EBV. I can't remember where I got it, but that's probably where it came from.
Well, and they share habitat with almost all, like some instantiation of Umacies shares habitat with like almost every Euro. If you look at their range, it's a complete 100% overlap, you know? And it's like, oh, this is really cool. I don't think I ever realized that. But it so I guess maybe I can't call myself that person anymore. Now I have to be like, oh no, you're clearly very interested in a region of stuff, you know, like
it's just a different lens. You know, we can look at these animals that we keep and, you know, the things that we do through so many different lenses. And I feel like that's kind of more in line with the field herping naturalist side of things, where, you know, as a biologist doing field work, I had to kind of really get a comprehensive view of a landscape and all of the different flora and fauna therein. So it's fun to think of it that way. I haven't really, you know, built upon that more, but I like having the little geckos that crawl on the grass and the little skinks that are under the rock and the snakes that's looking for the skink and, you know, so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's true. I feel like the only thing I'm missing over here now is like a legitimate desert iguana breeding operation, you know, like just like one or two, like a pair or so. Cause I feel like that's the only thing missing from my crew. It's like, you work with herbivorous desert lizards. Like, how could you not have a desert?
Get it done, man.
Desert iguanas are awesome.
They're so sick.
I kept them when I was a teenager and loved them. They're so cool.
They are super cool. And boy, oh boy, talk about something that you could just cook. You know, like
man, they could take it.
They are the most. I feel like desert iguanas and like zebra-tailed lizards, some of like the most heat tolerant. They just sit. I've just seen them out there when it's 5 million degrees, and you look, you know what I mean? And it's like, how you're just out here basking? Like, this is not a big deal. How is this happening? You know,
I think there's like I think it says that even in like the field guides about the desert iguanas, that they'll be diurnally active when it's like 120 degrees.
That's
like,
so crazy.
There's like, no problem.
It's pretty crazy, dude. I'd love to have
cool.
Cook an egg on him.
God damn it. Now I have to.
Yeah, seriously.
They're pretty cool. Super cool. Well, anyway, so I know I just definitely pulled us into a deep tangent, but that's definitely what interests me. I know there's more to talk about here.
All good.
Well, I mean, Lucas, you just touched on your, you know, like biology fieldwork a little bit. I'm curious about like how that dovetails with your keeping at all. You know, how does that all fit together for you, if at all? Or do they feel like very distinct, separate things?
Good question. I'd say, interestingly enough, a lot. So for folks that aren't aware, a lot of what a field biologist does for an environmental consulting company, because it's such a broad term, might be special status species surveys ahead of construction, you know, monitoring during projects to make sure that they don't run over that, you know, endangered frog or whatever, like it's stuff like that. And it just so happens that most of the listed species in the Bay Area are herps. So most of my field work centered around California red-legged frog, Alameda whip snake, San Francisco garter snake, drawing a blank, but yeah, mostly herps, which is certainly an overlap. So in order to do my job well, I needed to be pretty well versed in the ecology and natural history of our local herps, which is great if you're already a giant herp nerd and want to do that anyway. But other than that, I just feel like there's a hard to describe natural absorption of information when you're simply existing in an environment. I think that being in the field, being in an environment, experiencing everything about it, with all of your senses, except, maybe don't like lick the ground or whatever, but like you will never be able to learn more about an environment from reading or looking at pictures or anything like that. So despite not necessarily having my feet on the ground in Australia, I still feel like every time you're outside, you can learn something that's applicable to your animals if you think about it long enough.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I totally agree with that. I do. It also really feels like that thing you're speaking to, that just kind of like the overall gestalt, or whatever of a certain environment or habitat, that can't be translated through, raw data. That's like such a special thing to feel, from field herping.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's something that like you can cultivate through field herping, and then, it's easier to access. Totally. But it's also easier to access if you do ever get out to Australia, you already have like, those muscles are already familiar with that process, so to speak, and it's easier 100%. To perform in that kind of environment.
I think it's really important too for people that are just keeping copious amounts of snakes and lizards in boxes, to go outside and reconnect with, even if it's not the same species, not the same places, like what these animals are, and plug back into those context specific questions. Why does it look like that? Why does it do that? If you're not working with morphs, it ain't because it's in the box, it just reignites a lot of the right kind of questions, in my opinion, to spend time in the field.
Yeah. It's funny. When I taught at Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design for a little while, that's also where I graduated. And one of the things that would come up sometimes was the use of photography in drawing and painting, and the ways in which photography was both a help and a hindrance to the development of drawing skills. And
interesting.
because the main real reason is that people think of photography as like very honest, very real, very like accurate, but it's really, really not at all. It is just as manipulated and bizarre as drawing and painting. And I think the important way to think about it is to remember that a camera naturally flattens everything. It can't see around things. Right. And when you're walking out in the world, you can see around, you know what I mean? Your experience of the world and your eyesight gives you a dimensionality that a camera just inherently flattens into a really, really flat image. And I feel like field herping and getting outside is a great way of remembering that you can, like, your animal can go around stuff. You know what I mean? It can go it's like a full,
right. Dude. I mean, just, as simple as like, touch the damn rock, touch the rock in the sun, touch the rock in the shade.
Right.
Yeah. Like, you just learned something. It's really hot in the sun.
Totally. Yeah. And also, like, when you spend enough time sitting at a rock pile and watching the lizards or the chuck, whatever, for me, it's always like chuckwallas and collared lizards, just watching the way they interact in their space, it gives you a real sense of dimensionality. And I feel like one of the big experiences I've had when I go field herping and then I come back home is I look at my setups and I think these feel really flat. They feel super flat, both horizontally and vertical. They just feel very, very flat. And so I find myself very regularly coming back from experiences out in the field that make me want to buff out and flesh out and dimensionalize the interiors of my space in a way that is more informed by being in the space and seeing how the animals interacted with it, you know? I mean, and
yeah, no question.
This can feel like such a minor thing because you know, we have a tendency to sort of extrapolate. We'll say, we'll look at a picture and we'll be like, oh, he's on a rock. Great. Put a rock in there. Right. But it's like, what you don't recognize is the way that rock and its utilization, and not just in isolation, but in relationship to all the other rocks around it, the way it changes as the sun goes around and around and around and across the sky. And it you know, the way they use the rock changes, the angles that they can utilize the rock changes, the way they use hides can change, the way they're, you know, seeking, if there's food nearby, that'll change. The way they shelter from predators changes. Like it doesn't take long to recognize the deep complexities that go into
life is a complex system.
Yeah. Say what?
Life is a complex system.
It's crazy. And, crazy.
One of the popular terms in my circle of NPR, Morelli's Python radio people, is the cosmic octopus, which is, you know, you guys know.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. Even when you're in the field, that's just a snapshot in time.
Yeah.
You know, unless you're there, shit, you know, go every day for a decade, you don't know what's going on. You can learn more, but it's not comprehensive. It's just another picture.
Right. And even, you know, and that's sort of like, well, it's like, it's such a weird thing. You know, I feel like in some ways this kind of punctuates and underlines how impressive it is when someone can kind of back engineer from very little information a decent level of care for an animal that's not very well described or documented, because that shows like not just a level of research and attention to detail, but also an ability to extrapolate based on what you understand about similar environments and ecologies. And also, it also speaks to a way of interpreting like body type, like reptile and amphibian body type, and being able to interpret based on what you're seeing and saying, all right, well, this thing looks kind of like a flat-bodied lizard that utilizes crevices and probably enjoys heat and cold of various, you know, so there's so much you can pull just from the way the animal looks, you know, but
it also should humble us.
Oh yeah.
To realize that we need to know enough to know that we know nothing.
Right.
Yep.
And never stop asking questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. And that's, yeah. Damn. Yes.
Damn. Cool. So anyway, the field biology, it forced me to look at birds a lot.
Cool.
Don't give a crap about birds, but I had to. And I'm coming around. I'm coming around. Feathered reptiles, yeah. That's a big part. Yeah. I'm
wholly unconvinced by birds being feathered reptiles. I
don't know. Sometimes when I look at an Aki or a black-headed monitor or something doing their weird little like,
definitely birdie.
Head twitches. Yeah, very birdie.
Super birdie. I'm just
look like a crocodile foot and then look at a chicken's foot.
All right.
You know?
Take it easy.
Yeah.
Boy.
Look at a damn cassowary.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. You want to take it to the next level.
Yeah, true that. All right. Take it easy. Listen, some of us just don't want to let go of our Jurassic Park dreams. Okay.
Never.
I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever be able to come around to the being emotionally okay with the idea that dinosaurs had feathers. That just makes me really uneasy as a person. So just call me a Luddite, if you will. But
fair enough.
I'm just kidding.
It's understandable. It's understandable. I'm really bothered by the notion that giant short-faced bears were strictly scavengers. I want them to be like horrifying super predators.
Yes, exactly.
I'm really bothered by a lot of
damn
things.
Letdown. That's like I want to talk about it. It's like you. It's like meeting. It would be like meeting like the most gigantic Buddhist monk that is like the most jacked, yoked, just absolute unbelievable animal, but who's like, no, I just, you don't find MMA, you don't do anything. You're like, no,
I just meditate, man.
Meditate.
Well, that might be why they're gone.
I love the idea that that's why they're gone. That's hilarious. That's great. Oh, Christ. That really got me.
Well, okay. Shifting gears a little bit.
I
want to hear about podcasts.
Okay.
I mean, like, how did it start? Why did it start? And what have you learned from it?
So massive gratitude to the reptile podcasters, because that is definitely where I was able to feed the obsession. I started listening to the Morelia Python radio catalog my senior year of college, and just couldn't stop, couldn't get enough. Really that fed the early embers of this flame. And then when I was working in the field, not every assignment is a fun, endangered species survey. Sometimes you're doing biological monitoring and you're standing there for 12 hours watching a dude dig a hole. I listen to a lot of podcasts. That's how I passed the time. That's how I got linked up with Dr. Loafman, because I was listening to him talk about false water cobras on a podcast. So podcasting got me to grad school. I submitted my application for West Liberty and then was a guest for the first time on Morelia Python Radio a week later. And Loafman listened to my episode and, decided he wanted me to be his student because of that. So I owe a lot to the podcast. And
yeah, man, it's awesome.
I really enjoy consuming them. I started hopping on with the Morelia Python radio guys in 2020. Started doing the Carpets and Coffee show as a spinoff of that for the last few years as well. And now I do that and log on whenever somebody asks me to yap. So I'll talk anywhere.
That's great.
Got the gift of gab.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah.
Gift for me, curse for you. No, it's a great time. And the Carpets and Coffee thing is fun because it is just kind of hanging out. I feel like two of the things we talk least about are carpet pythons and coffee. I have to talk about Aspidites, Womas, and blackheads, no matter what we're talking about, because that's where my heart is.
Sure.
But
do you find, one thing that sort of shocked me about doing this podcast with Roy has just been I was unexpectedly changed by just the production of the show, just like talking to people, being thoroughly convinced, right, by a lot of things people say, be like, fuck, okay, I agree with you. I have to change everything I'm doing now. And just like all of a sudden, it was a really, it felt like a moment of really rapid learning curve, like very steep upward learning curve. Just like it was happening immediately. It was 100%. Amazing.
And I think the beauty of the medium is that you take the listener on that journey with you, right? So the majority of my learning, I'd say, through podcasts was as a listener, listening to people that actually know what they're talking about. Because the Carpets and Coffee thing, we don't tend to have guests. So, how much am I going to learn from the same two dickheads? No, I'm just kidding. But I would say too, it definitely is good, like human practice. You have to talk.
Yeah.
And that was important during COVID when there wasn't a lot of human practice. So appreciated being able to talk to people.
Yeah.
But no, I agree with you for sure. I mean, it's dangerous when you chat with somebody that's passionate about their group of species or whatever, and then they're really good at convincing you that that's the best thing out there, and then you need it too.
Yeah. Is there, right? Is there anything that you're doing differently now that stands as like a really stark contrast to the way you first started doing it?
In terms of keeping or
no, I meant like
podcasting.
So like I don't know if anything's changed. Maybe it's remained the same. I'm not sure.
That's a good question. Has anything changed? I would say that I would like to think that I'm a lot more open, less definitive in my statements.
Okay.
You know, I think it's really easy to make, you know, definitive statements, right? Like, but a lot of the times that comes back to bite you in the butt. So I don't know. I guess that's the first thing that comes to mind. Just try to stay open-minded, and again, know enough to know that you don't know anything.
Right.
Yeah. It just gets kind of drilled into you the more and more you do it. You're like, Jesus, I don't know a goddamn thing. That's I mean, really, like I'm not kidding at all. Like it really, like our conversation with Bill Strand, I was like, dude, I have never had an original thought in my life. You know, like I'm over here just copying other people constantly. It's a very
they have to come from somewhere, you know. I agree with you. I feel the same way, but you know, maybe we're just not giving ourselves enough credit.
It's probably, that could be the case. I think that's probably the case for you, but I'm like a legitimate, I'm a legitimate fraud. Nothing unique over here. That's so stupid. You know, it's an interesting thing, this podcasting medium, you know. I love to tell this story, if nothing else, just to help drill it into his head that he was wrong. But I love to joke with Jordan Russell, because I remember thinking about starting a show a little bit, like a few years before Roy and I committed to making this one. And I remember talking with him about it at the time and just being like, hey man, do you think there's any market? And he's just like, nah, I don't think there's a market for this. I don't think anybody would listen. And who would you talk to? And it was like a little, you know, I mean, obviously he was just sort of trying to give me the most sound advice he could give me. And he probably would have been right 10 years before, but you know, but not, maybe not. I'm not sure. But
I'm convinced it's all about like you guys, the personalities behind the mics, and consistency. I don't really think it matters what the hell you're talking about. If those two things are on point. It reminds me of the story of when Eric and Owen were thinking about doing Morelia Python Radio, when like podcast was like new, like that.
Totally,
like a long time ago. And speaking of Nick Mutton, Eric asked, he probably told the story on your show, but he asked Nick, like, can I do a show about carpet pythons? Like, that's a great idea, right? And Nick's like, what the fuck? Like, you're going to run out of ideas in a month. Like, what are you doing? Nobody cares. And, you know, 12 years later or whatever. So,
yeah, for sure.
So if you want to let it rip, let it rip.
True enough. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Jordan.
And let Jordan's words fuel your rise.
Yes.
I love to give that guy.
So this is really all about. It's about proving Jordan wrong.
Yeah, nothing like a vendetta, you know, to keep you motivated.
I mean, yeah, it's true.
It works for some people.
Oh man, this is a goofy episode, man. I feel so like we're just joking around. We're just cracking a bunch of dumb jokes. This is great.
Hope that's okay.
Yeah. No, this is great. I mean, I think this is great. One thing I want to talk to you about,
like, this is great. Oh God.
If we're no, this trust me, this is good. This is nice and easy and relaxed for me after a crazy day. So I'm glad.
Cool.
I think the only way it could be better is if we were all, you know, face to face. But
let's make it happen. Are you in California
we will. He's in Colorado. We gotta.
Oh, I love Colorado. Colorado's sick.
Colorado is in fact awesome.
Yeah. What part?
This is pretty cool.
I'm in Denver. I'm in like the Denver area approximately. Yeah. I work in Wheat Ridge, and then my academy that is up in Longmont. So I spend a lot of time kind of across the main Front Range part of Denver. So a lot of Boulder. It's great. Yeah, I love it here.
I do a little bit of traveling for music, and we had a string last year where we were in Colorado like 4 or 5 times, and it was just my favorite.
Oh my God.
Part of any of it. We went to Buena Vista and Steamboat Springs, and I like bought a little fly fishing rod and fucked off, and it was the best.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Well, next time you're out here, come visit the shop and we'll go fly fishing. That's
deal.
Yes.
Oh, you got me.
I just I have dove in headfirst. I am hooked.
No, literally.
I'm gonna throw up right now.
Watch the backcast.
Yeah, backcast, sir. Yeah, for sure. So we'll definitely do that.
See, I'm really bad at derailing.
It's okay. It's good.
That was great.
But we're always ready for it. Who knows?
I'm gonna tag along on this though, just so you guys know. I'm gonna sneak in.
Oh, the assumption was
fly fishing and hanging out.
The assumption. I
didn't think that was assumed, but no, I'm just kidding. You can come.
Sounds good. Cool.
So yes.
You were saying, Roy?
What else you want to know?
What was I saying? Oh yeah. I was going to ask you about what it was like to do the degree with Dr. Crawdad himself, and just like that whole process. What was it like? What was it like pursuing herpetoculture in a kind of more formalized setting? I'm just really curious about that whole thing.
Well, first of all, I mean, Zach is one of my favorite human beings. We
He's
are
best.
all lucky that Zach exists and decided to talk to us. He's an amazing guy. But really enjoyed doing the master's program for biology, zoo science. If I could do it again, I wish that I went and studied in person in West Liberty, just because it would have been really fun to interface more with the, Loafman and the rest of the lab and all the animals on campus. But it is a program that's set up to be remote. That was set up that way before COVID. So, no issues that I wasn't there, but it would have been cool to play with all their critters, but it was a fantastic experience. The coursework again forced me to care about other types of animals. You have to take your mammalogy, your ornithology, you got to do all of it. And of course, husbandry is going to be different for everything, but it can all apply when you tie it back to whatever you're focusing on. So I really enjoyed it. Zach was an incredible mentor, continues to be. We started out, he told me off the rip that my thesis was going to change. He said, you would be the first grad student I've ever worked with whose thesis didn't change. So at the beginning, I was going to do a reproductive study with the Brettles python, the Centralian python, because I had a good group in my apartment and I knew folks that were producing a lot of them. So we were going to do just kind of your standard artificial versus maternal incubation, stick data loggers in there in the egg mass and take a bunch of reproductive data and compare for significant differences in a bunch of different metrics.
Right.
And I did that. So in 2021, I was able to get 3 clutches at my place, sent data loggers to Nick Mutton, sent data loggers elsewhere. And wouldn't you know it, didn't calibrate the data loggers correctly. They tracked data for like 5 or 6 days before they ran out of memory. And so my graphs are really pretty. You can see where mom's warming up the eggs and when they're cooling down and when she's warming up the eggs. And, but useless. Pretty, but scientifically useless. So I ended up having to abandon that. And then I got in touch. I decided that I wanted to do some more hardcore, like field biological adjacent work, because I'm a hobbyist, I'm a keeper, I'm a breeder. I love that, but I'm also a field biologist. And I kind of recognize the difference in terms of journal article opportunities between the two. And there's a lot more opportunity to publish field data compared to stuff that we're doing at home, at least for now. So I got in touch with a researcher in Australia named Dr. Melissa Brutton, who did her PhD through the University of Queensland back in 2011 with the Woma pythons specifically. She had some amazing papers about radio tracking Womas, their thermal ecology, and the like. And she was great. Just slid into the DMs on ResearchGate, and she hopped on a call with me, and we got along really well. And she took me under her wing to go further with that data that she collected, a decade ago at that point. So I was going to do, as thesis attempt number 2, a thermal ecology piece, building upon the data that she collected that wasn't published yet about Woma pythons, working with her and her advisor over there, Craig Franklin. And that was amazing, even though that didn't end up being my thesis. Just how cool is it to get in touch with somebody who is the authority on a species across the world that I keep in my room and think is pretty. So she was great. Really appreciate all the conversations I had with her. And in the end, we didn't have a statistician to back us up. I wasn't getting a master's in stats, and the person that Dr. Loafman had in mind to help us was too busy. So when it was all said and done, I zigged again. And my final thesis was essentially a book on blackhead and Woma pythons, using a lot of the data and information, or not the data, but conversations and information with Dr. Brutton, and then doing a deep dive into the existing literature, books, everything I could. And hopefully that will be published and released to the public in the next year or two. But books are hard. Takes a long time.
Yeah, no kidding.
Only imagine.
So, grad school.
Nice.
So are there ways in which did you have any like various expectations in place when you started grad school, and were any of them like either confirmed or denied? I mean, was it what you anticipated it being in terms of how it, like the getting it done, or was it really, did you find it really new, kind of uncomfortable? I'm really curious.
Another great question. When I graduated from UC Santa Cruz, I studied environmental studies for my bachelor's. I was absolutely convinced that I was never going to go back to school. I could not have been happier to be done. My undergrad was a fairly miserable experience and never had grad school aspirations. But again, it's the heat of lockdown. I'm out there watching people dig holes, listening to podcasts, and stumbled upon Zach. And I didn't know what I wanted to do in life. I didn't know what I wanted to do tomorrow. All I knew is that I really liked snakes. And this guy was the guy that if I was going to do grad school, it would be with him, or I wasn't going to do it at all. So I was working on this creek restoration site where there was no cell phone service. I drove to the top of the hill. I literally just left the project. I hope, my bosses aren't going to listen to this. And I got him on the phone. And so grad school for me was not necessarily some very well thought out, like life step in my life plan with any sort of career aspirations or goals. I was really just pretty depressed in the middle of COVID. And I knew what threads, gave me back fulfillment when I pulled them. And that was animals and working with herps and studying herps. And so I just went with it and decided to do a degree mostly just so that I could talk to Zach, to be honest. I think it was worth the debt. We'll see if that sticks around. Joe Biden figure it out.
Come on.
Oh, Joe,
help a
just
homie out.
Help a homie out. I just wanted to learn about snakes with Crawdaddy. But yeah, that's really it, man. I just knew that I wanted to pick that man's brain and see where it went. It wasn't really deeper than that. So I didn't really have any expectations. It was kind of on a whim, and it was a way for me to get some kind of change in a very monotonous time and go for the exciting, more well-lit parts of my life, if you will.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Yeah, it's something I wonder about. I mean, I've entertained occasional fantasies of, going and pursuing further education there, or in a similar, some kind of similar institution, but just haven't really like pulled the trigger. Too many other demands going on. But that's a really cool thing to do. Really super cool.
It was a perfect time to do it. I really just, what else did we have going on?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and what about the book too? I'm really curious about the book. Like, you said that writing a book is hard. I mean, what are some of the things that have been sort of especially challenging about that process for you?
Well, good question. Not a lot of primary research. Australia doesn't really dish out funding for people to go study herps unless they're thought to be in danger, if you will. So Dr. Brutton's work with the Womas is really an outlier, and she was able to do all of that because at the time the Woma python was thought to be endangered. And so they were able to get resources to look into that. Black-headed pythons are not thought to be threatened or endangered. And as such, you could probably count, the scientific papers that have been written about that species on two hands, at least ones that, are offering something new. There's not a lot of data, not a lot of studies. So there was a large degree of just needing to get in touch with people and extrapolate from really old papers, a lot of work by, Dave and Tracy Barker, Pearson, Rick Shine, folks that were doing this decades ago. Sometimes that's still the best information available. So just accessibility of information was one. And another challenging aspect, I would say, is conflicting information. Of course, that's kind of the point, right? Is like, if you're getting a book, that's supposed to be like what is correct, right? Like, you would expect everything in that book to be backed up and correct. And so when you're looking at as much primary literature and other books and talking to different people and trying to assemble this pool of knowledge, a lot of the times they conflict with each other. And then you have to really sit there and do a little bit of mental gymnastics and figure out what you think and what is more based in truth, versus, I mean, sometimes there's not an answer, and you just kind of have to either state blah 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 said this and blah 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 said this, and we don't really know, further research needed, and I feel like with snakes and probably lizards too, more research needed is typically where you end up. So yeah. And then less from like an actually writing the book standpoint, but just kind of from like a human part of herpetoculture level, I think that a challenge is definitely, you know, the personalities that we have in the hobby and people not being particularly happy that, you know, somebody in his 20s that's only bred blackheads a few times and only bred Womas a few times has the audacity to write a book. To which I respond, I can't wait to read yours. And the more the merrier. You know, like get off your ass. I'd love to see it. So, you know, there you go.
For sure. Interesting. Yeah. You know, I hadn't even considered that. I hadn't even considered that anybody would even.
I don't claim to know anything more than anybody else. I just took the time to do it.
Right.
The book isn't my thoughts.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's interesting. I had never considered that particular aspect of it. That could be a lot to deal with. Does it bother you at all?
I think that
you're more of like a just fuck off, dude. I'm doing a good job. Everybody leave me alone.
It's not even that. I think that the part that bothers me is putting stock in the wrong things. I don't necessarily think that the criteria for a good author should be how many clutches they've gotten of species X in a box in their room.
Sure. I mean, it certainly wouldn't make one any more or less qualified. Right. You know what I mean? It's like,
and of course you also would like for members of the community to be excited about it and prop each other up, but
sure.
Reptiles attract an interesting crowd.
Yeah. I mean, I can understand the need if you're thinking about it as like just nothing but a knee-jerk reaction. I could understand it to a degree, like, and I don't mean in the sense that there's credibility to that claim, but I just, you know, like I could imagine finding out that there was a new book on Uromastyx coming out and it was written by someone who like nobody's ever heard of, and it's like, I don't even know who you are. Like you know, it doesn't mean that I wouldn't be interested in the book. You know what I mean? But it definitely, I could imagine, like, I'm not going to write a book, but that's different altogether. That's not for any reason other than like, I just don't have fucking time. But
no, totally.
But I can understand like in a knee-jerk way why one might come to that conclusion, but only very briefly. Like it wouldn't take that much unraveling that cord to be like, oh, wait a minute, no, that's crazy. Like writing a book is great. Like you should write a book. We should have some more information is better than less. Like that's great.
And look, you know, if you think that not you, but if somebody thinks that I might not catch something or might not write something the way that they would like me to write it, again, welcome theirs. And happy to talk to them, you know, don't push people out for trying to do something, you know, get me on the phone. Let me know what you think. Let's do this together.
Right. And it's also, it's not like,
but we all know that this is just a big, at one level, depending on where you're at in the hobby, it is just a big ego fest. And a lot of people aren't necessarily in it for knowing more about the animal. So
sure, that's true. That's true. I mean, it is so easy though, I think, to conflate, like it is really easy to conflate one's ability to reproduce something in captivity with one's understanding of that animal. Like those two things are really
a terrible benchmark.
Yeah, right. I mean, but I don't think that those two things don't overlap in some way. They could, you know what I mean? Like you definitely gain a level of understanding from keeping a lot of animals for sure. But it's not like it's just one side of the cube. It's like, this is just one part of this, and it's a very specific context. It's not understanding. Like, I couldn't tell you the first thing about Uromastyx anatomy. You know what I mean? Like, I had not one thing. Like, I don't know what their guts look like. I don't know. You know, so like where in the world lies my understanding of Uromastyx? Like, it's not to be found. You know, like it's not there. But we do often kind of conflate those things. You know, and Yeah, they're wholly unrelated, I guess. Right?
They are, and I don't think that reproduction should ever be taken as a litmus test for success or welfare, you know, in a more broad and comprehensive sense. It's the most basal of biological imperatives. You can be on death's door and living a horrible life and still have babies. Like, I'm not saying that it doesn't mean anything, but it certainly doesn't mean everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And it definitely it can depend on the animal a lot too. I mean, you know, we have examples of, like, you know, great example would be Coleonyx variegatus, right? The banded geckos. I've watched those things copulate in a deli cup in transit.
Right.
You're like, what? You know, you would not find a Uromastix copulating in a deli cup in transit. Like, it's not going to happen, right? And so there is a level to where it's like getting an animal to reproduce in a way that is not just successful, but where everything looks great and everything is working well while that's going on. That's something very different than what you were referring to as, you know, sort of like as, you know, like the most, you know, the last thing they'll still manage to produce even when they're
it's
not
just,
doing well,
yeah,
right?
There is a spectrum. One part,
too.
like you're talking about, just
and it is weird. I mean, because it is weird because I agree, obviously, like it seems like a no nonsense easy thing to understand that your ability to breed something does not mean anything about your knowledge of that animal. It doesn't say anything, but a lot of
people that are really good at breeding different colored ball pythons.
Sure.
And they point on a map where it came from. I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But again, it also does, you know, as you said, it doesn't mean nothing. It does mean something for sure.
Right.
You know, like because I feel like it is there are a lot of animals that won't breed given specific conditions and specific levels.
I agree.
Reduced stress. And so it is a weird, but again, the only reason I'm even mentioning this is just because it does make me a little uneasy the way we conflate those things, you know?
Totally. And you know, my comments in the last, 10 minutes or whatever are how captive reproduction is relevant to a natural history book.
Yeah, totally.
Totally.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, understood. Yeah. But even it's like,
I'm definitely not poo-pooing or saying it's easy or unimportant, you know?
No. But, you know, but even like I tell people all the time, because people will ask me questions about things with Euros, and most of the time I have an answer, but a lot of the times they'll say, you know, it'll be like, oh, what do you think do you think it would be okay to feed this? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm not, you know, like I don't know anyone on earth who knows whether it's safe for Euromastix to eat a lentil or not.
Totally.
You know, like my choices around not feeding those don't have anything to do with understanding of nutritional content or the way that a single lentil would interact physiologically in the gut of a Euromastix. I have no idea, right? But that's not where my choice is coming from, right? It's coming from a different place. But I find it very fun to tell people, or like lighting. I don't know. I know jack about lighting. Like, I'm not a lighting nerd. I don't know, you know, I mean, I know enough. I know, you know, obviously I have like a basal level of information, but like when people say, do you think this type of light would be okay at this angle, you know, in this context? I'm like, I don't know. Like, how would I know? Like, how would I know? Like, I'm not. That is so far outside my wheelhouse, and I feel like it's really easy for people to get away with just answering and assuming correctness, you know, based on things that they can do that bear no relation to whether or not they understand anything about the positioning of light bulbs, right? So it's like it is so freaking weird that is the case in herpetoculture, right? This is, I mean, it's been spouted a million times, but folklore husbandry, right? I mean, that's all this is, you know, it's all
folklore husbandry and conflating the difference between controlled deprivation and naturalistic keeping.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait, controlled deprivation. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that's a Loafman Herp class one. I would definitely want to read the paper again to do it justice, but essentially, like the too long didn't read would be, rather than referring to our setups as anything naturalistic, even in the best of cases, it is controlled deprivation. We're never going to be able to replicate their true environment. All we can do is try and make their deprived state as optimal as possible.
Fascinating. Okay. Interesting perspective. That's cool. Very cool.
Makes me think of the conversation that we just had with Bill, and he was talking about how he sees like the kind of cutting edge of husbandry, like in this frontier where we're continuing to add complexity, add inputs, add enrichment, and that like in many ways that conflicts with the imperative of the like, industrialized breeding standard, which is to figure out like the level at which you can, the minimum standard essentially at which you can keep something, in a state of controlled deprivation,
right?
At the point at which it will still reproduce and live outwardly healthy life. And it's an interesting thing.
And that's the trick. Yeah, right. Outwardly, most of these things don't emote. We
disagree.
We have to define our benchmarks.
Sorry.
Oh, what'd you say?
I said I disagree. I think they emote
about them.
Proudly.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, some more than others, sure. But again,
I'm a smart ass. Don't worry about. I please don't let me derail it.
You're good. I mean, I appreciate that because it's true. Like I would imagine a lot of the lizards that you work with probably give you a lot more feedback than say a Woma python at my house that is pretty much not emoting.
Or if it is, it's in a way
and I keep like
subtle to interpret.
Certainly, but so in comparison to other taxa, in the animal kingdom, many reptiles do not have mammal social primate compatible mechanisms of emotion.
For sure. Man, I'm reading
but the
this
point I was going to make.
Sorry, no.
I'm so sorry.
My bad.
Just before I forget and derail us again, is that we set our variables and our benchmarks for what we consider, good enough or an optimal state of welfare. Like that's up to us in many ways. And in many cases, we're not getting much back to either justify or challenge our assertions.
Interesting. Very interesting. It's okay. That's great. That's exactly why I asked. I mean, it is an interesting concept.
And I talk a lot more in snake terms. I definitely would say you get a lot back from something like a dwarf monitor or
sure.
It's a spectrum.
I'm
sure.
with you. I guess I just I tend to be more on I tend to fall more along the lines of like what you articulated thereafter, which was I tend to think that I feel like every living thing I've ever encountered is highly emotive and has a really complex way of existing, but it just may be that I'm not really tuned to that. I'm reading this book by I think it's by like, I'm going to butcher her name. I feel horrible, but it's like Zoe Schlanger or something. She's a plant researcher, right? Scientist. And the book is called The Light Eaters. And it's like the subheading of the book is something like getting a reimagination or a different vision of life on Earth, and basically I'm not through the book, but I'm in a section of the book where she's effectively rattling off all of these plant characteristics that really can only be described as some level of intelligence or consciousness. Like there's no other way to put it.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's a very very good, humbling point.
Yeah.
Like, they communicate.
Right.
Some people say plants scream in their own way. Like, it's like you said, we just don't necessarily speak the language. Doesn't mean that it's not happening. So totally with you in that regard.
I figured as such, and it's such a weird, it's a funny thing because I feel like this is so related to what we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation. I feel like in some ways I'm just a little more tuned on a fucking uromastics, like something about whatever it is, whatever emotional frequency at which they're operating. I feel like I'm just slightly, my antenna is just bent a little towards that somehow, without even knowing, and it's such a strange, it is so bizarre. But even the idea of like, even what that phrase you mentioned, the controlled
deprivation.
Controlled deprivation. Even this feels like, obviously I don't have like certainly not a formal criticism or anything like that at all. Like that sounds like I'm going to use that term. I think it's great.
I'll send you the paper.
Yeah. I'd love to read the paper. I want to read it. I want to know more.
I want to read it too.
Yeah, I really want to read it. But even that, it feels like, but there are ways in which even that verbiage, I feel a little repelled by the verbiage because I'm like, well, but I'm like, I don't know, because
can we challenge it?
No, I think there are ways. I think it's right. Right. But I do think it everything changes context all the time. Like the nature of life and evolution is a change in context and a response, always, no matter what. And I feel like I'm inclined to think about the most elevated, beneficial, ethical version of herpetoculture being more of a context change than something as the word deprivation just is so. And I mean, I think it's right. I'm not, but I do, but I think there's
I know what you mean.
Obviously,
it's something to chew on. It's a sour first bite.
Yeah.
Sour
first bite.
I honestly have appreciation for things like that. I think, I mean, even just, I mean, I've kind of, mentioned this before, but I think it's interesting, like how like effortlessly and loosely we throw around like the term captivity.
Sure.
It's a complicated term, like let's unpack it. Where's the other, like, there's another context in which that term gets used.
Yeah.
Well, imagine if we
it's
grew
pretty
up
rough
in a
to
world,
talk about.
Absolutely.
Imagine if we grew up in a different world where there weren't zoos and it wasn't normal to have a fish tank in the living room.
Yeah.
Like somebody in a place where that's all foreign would look at what we're doing and be like, what is wrong with you?
Totally. Yeah. And I've spoken to this before. That I would actually, I think I would prefer to live in a world in which it was irrelevant to keep animals in any sort of,
and that's where we get to Phil's
or enclosure. But exactly,
but that's not
the context. That's not the context that I live in. Yeah, exactly. That's not the world that I live in. And I don't think it's any more righteous to be like, I choose not to participate. And I'm gonna
let them all die in the ecliptic forest.
Like I don't think that's better than saying like, okay, I'm gonna participate and I'm gonna try and do so with as much care and sensitivity and respect and compassion for these creatures as I possibly can.
As an environmental studies major, I fall very firmly on the cynical side of the environmental outlook spectrum. And I personally have no doubt that in my lifetime, there will be animals in this room that don't exist in the wild anymore.
Sure.
So, you're right. It is different.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's important too, because like, I don't disagree with either of you in those statements or anything at all, but I do. And again, this very well could, I'll be the first to admit that this very well could be my brain continually attempting to rationalize my choices and decisions. So I remain open to that. But it would also be super weird
I'm sure the very first people who ever started, keeping cats in their house, people were like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like, what are you doing?
Aren't cats the ones that domesticated themselves?
Yeah,
too? So
right?
yeah, it's extra weird.
I still think there's value in, look, if there's value in the invisible art concept, which there very well could be, I'm open to that as a meaningful avenue for justification. Totally open to that. In part, right? Not necessarily in whole, but I think it's also totally viable to think about herpetoculture as the very, very early seedling of or sprout of a form of domestication. Like, I think that's totally legitimate, because I also think that that's it's a context. I think that domestication has a lot of different looks. I think that as we move out of a world in which the animals we domesticated gave us a really well-defined physical purpose, like food or work or horsepower, I think it's totally reasonable to guess that some domestication may happen for mimetic and psychic purposes, and not exclusively physical, tangible ones. I think that,
love that. That's a new one for me.
I think it's totally reasonable, and I also think it's probably, it makes it even more important to balance the ethics of what you do. You must do what you're doing well, and do it with care and grace and respect, and really do it justice. I think it's very important, but I really do think that that's a valid lens. And can't remember where I was going with this. And so somehow there's a part of me that when I hear things like control deprivation, where I'm like, okay, I'm with you to a point where it becomes like, all right, but hold on, we have to think of this. I've cited this before, but right, we've all heard people who talk about things like corn as having hijacked us evolutionarily, right? Like, we think about this thing.
God.
We domesticated it. We took control of this. We did this with cows, with horses, with dogs, with cats, with guinea pigs, you name it, right? But I think if we're
hubris there.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little right? It's like, it's actually they kind of parasitized our psyche.
Yeah.
Right. And so
made themselves very abundant.
Right. That's
highly successful organisms.
That's mimetic evolution, man. Like, the bearded dragon is a profoundly successful organism. Profoundly. It's probably more numerous in the United States than it is in Australia. I mean, I actually have no idea if that's true or not. That might be total bullshit, but it's
possible.
Like, there's a lot of
it's within the realm of
there are so many in the world.
Yeah.
The logical conclusion here, everybody, is that this is a cry for help. Phil is held captive by Uromastix ornata.
I have Uromastix brainworms. Help.
Toxoplasmosis.
Yeah, I do. I have Uroplasmosis.
They have got him, people.
Uroplasmosis, dude.
I'm gonna have to listen back to the last 5 minutes of what you just said, because I have never gone down that thought hole, and that's a good one. I like it.
I'm so glad you like it. That's great. It's just something that seems possible, right? I mean,
well, at the end of the day, it also doesn't matter. It's just another example of monkeys trying to label things.
Yeah, but it's cool though. I mean, I think it's really cool to think about.
It is
an evolutionary success methodology being, let's attach ourselves to these weird monkeys. Like, let's do it. Like that one looks at me weird. Let me go crawl into a tank in his house.
Right. No, I agree with you. Would it need to be, though? Would there need to be action on the organism's end for it to be valid?
No, because I think it's an emergent property, right? Like it's. I think so much about evolution is emergent, right? Like it's this weird, indescribable thing. It's like a murmuration of birds. It's like, why does that happen? like 10 different reasons. That's why there's no one thing. It's like they're not all consciously doing it. It's, I think
you're right.
I think
given enough generations, there'll be frozen thawed mice eating cage critters, no matter where they came from.
Oh yeah, fuck, totally. I mean, yeah, that's even weirder. I mean, think about and I think it's also possible. Like, I think Roy will like this one, I'm sure, but like in the same way that sometimes evolutionary success does not yield evolutionary well-being. I mean, I feel like that's kind of that's my personal worldview. I think for now on people, I think we were better. I think we were happier, more well-rounded, more well-functioning individuals when we were living in hunter-gatherer groups, and we had the only things we had.
Really, our mental health peaked in the Pleistocene, man.
Like, that's when we were really doing it right, and then really good evolutionary choices took us down a path at which we land in a place where our software hasn't caught up, our hardware hasn't caught up to the new software yet. We're in a place, some stuff has to change about the way our brain is expecting the world to look. And I think that's happened with other domesticated creatures. We are self-domesticated. I think that's happened with other domestic creatures. Something's sufficiently changed, at least in some of them. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe there hasn't been enough time.
Well, it's like 94% of the mammalian biomass on Earth is us and our food animals
and cows.
Yeah.
So wild. Yeah. That's so wild. What I think
it might be more than that.
Yeah, it might be higher than 94 now. It's it's the last statistic I saw, but
it's
a wild.
I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if it's higher.
Wild, and especially given if you are one to take the cynical or pessimistic environmental view. Yeah, the hard reality may be that there may come a time when, we're all living on Mars and whatever I've got in my fucking tank is all we've got, like I've got, the only reason we even have Uromastics at all is because we bred them, and probably by then they won't be the same thing anymore. They're probably not going to be the same thing, like I bet
Euros would thrive on Mars, dude. They just seem like a type.
Crush Mars. Just go plant a few acacia trees out there after you, what is it called? Terraform. After you terraform it, just go
like in Spore. Did you guys play Spore?
No, but I
know.
All right. Yeah, it's great. We basically just need to do Spore.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And who knows? Maybe they're going to be our companions when we take off into the cosmos. You know what I mean? We're going to have a limited number of things that we just go. I mean, this is really getting weird. I'm going to have to stop now.
Limited number of things. You can shove a lot of snakes in drawers.
It sounds very Noah's Ark of you, sir. Like, no, it's true. You can.
And we can go from talking about control deprivation to sensory deprivation, and we're doing the whole circle.
Just kidding, here. By the way, people.
This is good. I love it.
Please don't come for me.
We are creeping up on 2 hours.
Okay.
And
what the hell are you guys going to call this episode?
I have no idea yet. Maybe I'll just call it off. I'm just going to call it Off the Rails with Lucas.
That was my nickname in college.
Lucas, Roy, and Phil eat the Guatemalan insanity pepper.
What color is this pill?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's the title right there. What color is this pill? With Lucas Lee.
That's pretty good.
Episode 86. It's done.
That on a t-shirt.
I'm talking about? Do you know the one I'm talking about? Where?
No.
Yeah, dude. Homer goes to this chili festival in Springfield, and Chief Wiggum feeds him this crazy pepper that's like glowing, and he says it's cultivated by the inmates of a Guatemalan insane asylum. Okay, and it's like the spiciest thing that he eats, and he hallucinates because he eats like 10 of them. And he goes crazy.
Yes.
Johnny Cash, who's his spirit guide, and he's a coyote. It's awesome. It's the best.
Great.
It's the
I want that pill.
One of the best episodes you'll ever watch in your life. One of the best ever. But anyway, 2 hours. We should let's move. You want to move to the last like one or two, or how do you, Roy?
Yeah. Let's just close it out with just a couple. We'll do like
whatever you want.
One and then our closer.
I'll sit here all day.
I mean, you do.
We obviously are gonna have to do this again, so I'm just gonna say that now. But
of course.
Okay.
For now, let's continue to keep our little future caps on. And I'm curious, Lucas, like what would you like to see out of herpetoculture, like in the next 5 to 10 years? Like what would you like to see more of?
I would love to see more prioritization of keeping species because you think that species is rad and you like that species, and not because if you breed it to something else, it'll make a pretty color that might be worth 50% of what it's worth now when you're making this plan. I would like people to lean further into the love of the animals and natural history, and less about the business side of herpetoculture. I think that I'm inherently a hypocrite, as probably anybody saying this would be, because I do breed and sell reptiles. But I would like to think that that is not my first priority. You know, I'm not. I just think that the morph game and the race to the bottom, if you will, that comes with it is far more harmful than good for herpetoculture. And I wish that everybody was just a little bit more into the animals and a little bit less into themselves.
But I like me.
I like you too. I'm so glad to meet you.
Don't encourage him, Lucas. What are you thinking?
I hate you.
Good. No,
I don't know. Again, like, I'm not saying don't do the other thing. I know that's like the gateway to get a lot of people into this. You know, maybe they're like, ooh, I can pay for my rodent bill if I breed this snake. Like, I get it, you know, but just don't lose sight of the living thing that's part of your business plan.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. Well said. Very well said. Okay, well, so then I suppose I'm just going to snipe the last question from Roy. Just
get it.
My goddamn show. No, just kidding. So
here first, everybody.
Whose show is it anyway?
I'm just some guy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, just some chump, dude. No, I'm just kidding. So we ask the same question to everyone at the end, and it's why herpetoculture, and it's intended to be a very open-ended question, like. You know, whether why you do it, why we do it, why should we do it, why shouldn't we do it, whatever. Why herpetoculture, sir?
Because it chose us.
There we go.
And now we have each other.
There's some parasitism. Right? Let's do it. Yeah, that's parasite all day. That's great. It's a brain worm, which I love. I love that idea.
That's sufficient.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it doesn't certainly
great.
But no, I mean, seriously, like the community part too. Like, it's important. It's good. A lot of good people. Just got to find them.
It's for sure. It's very true. Very, very true. I feel like some of the best people I know, some of the best people who've been an influence in my life have been in herpetoculture. So.
There's way worse shit to get into.
For sure. Rock and roll. Jiu-jitsu.
Rock and roll, bro. How dare you? Like, you unbelievable.
I just said that because I know Lucas is into music, so I just torpedo both you guys right there.
That was a double whammy, dude. You sunk my battleship, right?
You can't sink my battleship, bro. Rock and roll will never die.
Oh, that's so stupid.
No, I actually also like those things. I'm just not as good at either of them as you guys are. So
well, it's cool though that you're like an artist and illustrator. I feel like there is a lot of overlap between reptile people and creative artistic-y people, musicians and art.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised sometimes when I'm, because I do meet when I'm at the academy. Sometimes I'll meet a random person who just keeps snakes or whatever. I'm like, get out of here, really? Yeah. And then I'm always surprised when someone reaches out to me on Instagram that's a keeper and they're like, dude, I do jiu-jitsu too. I'm a blue belt. I've been doing it for 5 years. I'm like, hell yeah, dude, get after it. Let's go. It's pretty cool. But I also would be the first to admit that I never anticipated the ways that the art education that I got and the education that I got through jiu-jitsu would inform what I do in herpetoculture. I never anticipated that. That's for sure. That was never in the cognitive cards. So
you put a lot of lizards in chokeholds
all the time. Frankly, it's the best way to get them to start breeding. Honestly, that sounded really weird.
No.
That's not what I meant. Oh my god! I was so stupid.
What is these,
So
Dylan?
anyway, this has been Project Herpetoculture, and
what color pill was that?
We really did it wrong. We really did it wrong. I apologize for bringing you into this mess. It's just meant to be a gag, but no, it's just in philosophical ways, like philosophically, like the art really, the terminology, the way of thinking about things, the critical eye. Same thing with jiu-jitsu, the critical eye. I mean, you could get on YouTube and see all kinds of flashy techniques that will never work for you ever. Or you can just drill the one same goddamn thing that I've been showing you for the last 5 years, and you can just do it. And if you just do that, it'll be fine. It'll be good, So it helps you shave off the nonsense, I guess. So anyway, that was let's go ahead and call that at a deal. We've done
okay.
it. We did it.
Lucas, where can people find you? Where can they hear your show?
Okay. All the animal stuff is under Centralian Exotics. Google will fix the spelling. I don't want to spell it out. It's a tough one. But Centralian Exotics, www.centralianexotics.com. I do Carpus and Coffee on the Morelia Python radio network occasionally. We used to be bi-weekly, but been pretty bad at it. And yeah, if you want to talk to me about anything, just hit me up. Happy to chat.
Great.
Any and all of you.
Can't wait for the next one, dude. This was great
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, this is great fun.
It's
Yeah,
a pleasure.
I'm looking forward to hanging out.
Yeah,
definitely. Let's go find some critters.
Hell
Let's
yeah,
do it.
absolutely. That'll be the
And
best.
then rip trout out of lakes.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll go beat them up.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna hit the button.